Good morning, everybody. Joshua Laycock here, Lifestyle Evolution. I don't know that I always have something important or profound to say. I think it'd probably be fairly presumptuous of me to assume that everything I say has to have some deep meaning. I do my best. So it's been an interesting couple days. I woke up this morning to a note from my aunt that her husband had passed away. So this is my stepfather. He was a very important man in my life. He passed away a few years ago. Stepfather doesn't really seem to do it justice, but his sister's husband, Jim is his name. And Jim would have been 84 in a couple weeks. And he was an interesting cat. He lived in Vancouver with my aunt, and I was fortunate enough to spend a bunch of time with him when I lived out there. Talk about the wild man. Jim was in the Navy. I think that he probably did some pretty stupid shit when he was younger. He told me a story about how he used to like to drink, and he was a drinker when he was younger, and he was annoyed at how early the bars would close. He was kind of like a pioneer in Vancouver. Like, this is back in the day. He lived in West Vancouver before it was built up and before it was this sort of super high-end rich part of town that it was. And anyway, he was annoyed at how early the bars closed. He thought that was just stupid that someone would tell him when he can and can't drink and have fun. So what did he do? He opened an after hours totally illegal bar, and he just told me so many crazy stories about what they did when they were running this bar. It was like a pool hall after hours joint, and that was one of the things that I take away from my time with Jim. Is he was a man of action. Sometimes that action wasn't always well thought out. But be damned if he was going to let a good idea go to waste. Or a bad idea go to waste. He was a neat dude. I only knew him later in life. I didn't know him when he was a young man, obviously. At his age, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. But he was an incredible woodworker. He wanted to learn how to make bowls and to turn a lathe. So he just did. And, one day he just decided he wanted to learn how to blow glass, to make glass art. So he did. He figured it out. I was renting a home in North Vancouver, and it was an old junker of a home, and there was a lot of electrical problems. And I was mentioning this to him, that I really wanted my landlord to come in and fix these electrical problems. And in a typical Jim way, he was like, "What's wrong with you? Just go do it yourself." I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that." And he said, "All right, I'll be right over." And he came over with his tools, and he helped, and he taught me how to change light switches and change out, power outlets and things of that nature, and walked me through how it worked. And he's so funny. I remember I was nervous about the electricity. I was afraid of electrocuting myself and burning the house down. And I kept being really tentative. And he's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Well, if I touch it, I'm going to die." And he's like, "No, you're not. It's only if you touch these two together that you die." I'm like, "That can't be true." And of course he starts touching it, and then he licks it. And he's like, "You're fine. Just don't touch them both." So he grabbed two pieces of cable and, he's like, "That's what happens. Don't do it." He was a really interesting guy. And I really appreciated my time with him. My favorite story of Jim, it's about, he had a hell of a sense of humor. And I remember we were at this cabin, and I was a young guy. I was pretty young, but I was definitely young from an experience perspective. And we were up chopping wood or something. My aunt, my uncle, and I were there. My folks weren't there. I think it was the summer that I was hanging out. And me being overly clever. We were out chopping wood and we were moving it from where we needed to go, and we were going to bring it in, and we had this wheelbarrow over there and everything, and I was feeling pretty tough and feeling pretty manly, and I was chopping wood, and I said, okay, we got this giant pile of wood here, and we're gonna form a work line, and I'm gonna hand it to you, Aunt Liz, and you're gonna hand it to Jim, and Jim is gonna put it in this wheelbarrow, and we're gonna get all this wood piled up and take it inside, and we're gonna be nice and warm. And my aunt humored me for a moment. My uncle just kind of looked at me and he said, we could just move the wheelbarrow. And I just remember we all just practically peed ourselves laughing at the stupidity of what I was trying to do. And it was so typical that I was massively overthinking something and leave it to pragmatic Jim to find the simplest solution to a simple problem, where this silly young city kid thought that he was going to use this intellect to solve a problem. And it just kind of reminds me of how clueless sometimes I am. And I wonder whether at work or dealing with my kids or with my spouse or with whatever, am I overcomplicating things? Do sometimes I just have to move the wheelbarrow? And the other day I talked about manufactured emotions and things like guilt and it's interesting. I didn't appreciate that as I was recording that message, he had passed away. I didn't know. And of course, this morning I mourned him, and I'm sad. But I instantly started to think about, I should have called him more. I should have done this. We didn't get a chance to connect over the holidays. We have a big family, and no bullshitting, I was talking to my wife and I said, man, we really need to call Liz and Jim this weekend and have a chat with them. And I missed that opportunity. But it is what it is, and Jim would say, well, fuck, move on. Don't make the same mistake twice. So on a really happy note, this will be a good video, guys. Didn't anticipate this. On a really happy note, yesterday my sister gave birth to a beautiful boy named Hudson. And whenever the clan gets weaker, it also gets stronger. And I'm really excited to meet this little dude. We're going to go on the weekend and we're going to hang out with him. And it's really awesome. It's my first nephew or niece. I was the first one to have kids in the family. And I'm really proud of my sister. She was afraid. I mean, I can't imagine what it must feel like for a woman going into childbirth. That's gotta be scary as fuck. And she was scared, but she toughed through it, and she sorted it out. And I'm pretty hard on my little sister. Probably pretty hard on everybody. But I said to her, I said, you know what? Afterwards, I said, I'm proud of you and I love you. And just remember that no matter what life throws at you, remember what you just accomplished. Remember how scary that was. And pull from that you can accomplish anything that you need to accomplish. So where we have loss on one hand, we have tremendous gain on another hand. And despite how I sound, which is kind of interesting, I'm both sad and happy at the same time. And I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes twice. It's the lesson we take from things. Take action. Don't be afraid of the outcome. Even if it's stupid, do it. We'll learn from it. And celebrate our personal victories. So I'm going to go and sort my shit out. But I wanted to share that with you guys today. And enjoy the day. Make sure you're not staring at a situation where all you got to do is move the wheelbarrow. See you tomorrow.